everyone, my name is Alayshia Knighten, and today I'll be discussing progressive delivery with observability. So who am I? As I said before, I'm Alayshia Knighten, and I have a background in systems engineering, and I love diving into all types of infrastructure and observability things. Currently, I'm an onboarding engineering manager at Honeycomb, which that means you can find me buzzing all over the place, helping customers. So let's talk about what we're discussing today. Let's discuss observability and how this thing improves your deployment. From there, we will discuss what this looks like and go over examples. So what is observability? Observability is about being able to ask random questions about your systems without having to know ahead of time what you want to ask. Observability focuses on the development of the application or service and the rich instrumentation you need, not to poll and monitor for those thresholds or define health checks, but to actually ask any arbitrary questions about how your software works. To understand, the answers do not come in a ready-to-order format. Monitoring for known problems doesn't address growing number of issues that arise. You need to be able to ask questions you had not anticipated. So hear me out. Imagine being able to see that issue that randomly happens every 3 months or so, or identify exactly what user X is specifically describing. You have all the tooling around all of the things that they have access, and you can identify things that you actually both care about. So how does observability improve your deployment? Understanding systems. Understand what your systems are doing. Production is going down? No problem. We can test that. Enhancing personal interests. This is visibility into what you care about. And let's be honest, as X person, I'll only care about X thing within the system. And so now, since there's observability, we get to see all of the things and we get to ask questions about those things that are relatable to us. And my favorite, business to technical language translation. Now that we have visibility into this data, we can add and identify more of the business context that our boss is identifying, whether that's latency, errors, capturing emails and ID for each user, whatever floats your boat. The reality is, if your boss comes in or PM or whomever comes in and says, hey, we want to test or we want to identify slow users or endpoints that are slow, you can use that information and transform it into technical terms and query in on that information. So what does this look like? It looks like a hot ass mess. I'm joking. It doesn't look like a hot ass mess. More so, it looks like an orchestra. So bear with me for a second. I'm sorry I've been corny up until this point, but it's going to get even cornier. Imagine going into a symphony. You can hear each instrument distinctively, but it sounds as one. Even better, the instruments used are getting along, so there's no context switching. Everyone in the audience is hearing and being captivated by different sounds that make up one thing. Observability is just like that when you understand the unit of work and apply the appropriate context. Yes, music to everyone's ears. Example time. So let's listen to the symphony this orchestra that I've been referring to. So before we get off into it, I want to discuss a few of the bits. Let's have a problem statement. My company is deploying a new beta version of a catalog application. I would like to understand what the build is doing and then use customer information to verify that the system is working. So this application I have is written in JavaScript using Express. It's a very simple application. Do not judge it, please. I'm using Circle CI to deploy it and to promote the application to beta, and then to beta, which releases to a subset of customers, and then to the masses. And I'm leveraging Honeycomb, which is in charge of both monitoring the pipeline as well as the application once it's deployed, so I can understand what users are doing and what they're getting themselves into, and if I'm mucking up the customer happiness. So let's dive in. So the objective of all of this thing is to shine a light everywhere. So we're going to leverage observability to get the information that we need where it matters the most. So we're going to shine a light around the application. If you look at on the left side, all of these things are being injected directly into the code. By doing so, we're going to identify the application or service. We're going to be able to ask the question about what application this is. And we're going to also isolate the version. So we know that, hey, we've deployed, for example, on version 2.0. What's happening with version 2.0? Then we're going to identify what is happening at each function, for example, and get information that we refer to as high cardinality data, or that enriched data, which would be the user and its ID. So we're getting the username and the ID, and we're going to be able to ask the question, hey, for a subset of users, what's happening? Or for a specific user, what's happening? And my favorite part in all of this, we're going to let OpenTelemetry do the work for us. So auto instrumentation has libraries and frameworks that cater to your language and your specific needs. So in this case, we're pointing to an auto instrumentation node package, which includes auto instrumentation for a lot of the fundamental things that you find in JavaScript. For example, Express, DNS, GraphQL, etc. And if there's things that auto instrumentation does not have for us, such as a custom third-party API, things like that, that's okay. We can put a span around that. The idea is that we want to know what's happening when a user does X, Y, and Z, and we want to be able to see that. We want to be able to track it and identify if parts are moving slow, if they're moving fast enough. What does that look like, and how does that translate? And then from there, while we're at it, let's also shine a light around the pipeline. Let's infiltrate that pipeline to know how long things are taking. If a step fails, we have the opportunity to identify why. We can give that same custom context to get key information from our pipelines. So this may be something like when this step runs, we want to get this information. So that might be, we may want to know what version of nodes being used, etc., etc. The possibilities there are endless. My favorite part, let's shine a flashlight by querying systematically. So let's answer questions right into the pipeline. Let's use those questions to dive into what you can do next. In this case, I'm verifying that my beta users are not receiving errors. If the count of that error is greater than 0, I will not move it to the masses. Of course, you can come up with something more creative than and there's a lot of other things out there. But this is just an example of being able to say, hi, I've moved this over. Is this safe with actual user data? And then, while we're at it, let's discuss shining a light on testing and production. By testing and production, actual decisions can be made on what we're seeing. You can ask all sorts of questions to identify things like error, latency, max, mins, whatever information you want and whatever it means to you, you can do that. And this because you're placing this directly in the code. And this is how you can do questions your way. This can change over time. You can leverage observability to make those applications faster. You can identify opportunities to rework code and allow your team to get alerted on actual data that we know is an issue. So I'm going to pause for just a moment because I'm going to switch over. I went through what we're shining a light on, but I want to give a basic example of what this looks like real time as well. All right, so I'm back. So originally I pushed up a change here, and this particular change, go to Circle CI, and we're going to use build events to allow Honeycomb to listen in on all of these builds. And so it's using what's called a watch, and it's listening in to gather that information. How it, as it's watching, it's looking at the build. And so while looking at this package, I'm installing packages, and I'm also adding extra field context, which is the application and the version, to understand when looking at this particular data, what application and version I'm referring to. So I can see the build happening at real time. From there, it then deploys to beta, And then I run this customer simulation, which basically hits an endpoint. So there's some real-time data there. And then I check customer stats. And then I also add a field for the number of errors so I can understand what's happening there. And then if that's all good, we hold to send this to more of, to the masses, as I'm calling it. And so that's been holding. And so here, I ran a new build just recently, and that build has failed. And so based on the process that we talked about, so it's checking some customer statistics here. And so now we're seeing that seven errors have occurred, so it won't be able to process. So where are these errors coming from? We're actually querying within the workflow itself. We have a script that's calling out that API to get this information. This API is referencing this, where it's identifying, a few seconds ago, I hit a few additional errors, which is why it says 9 here. But we're basically querying for this service version, where it exists and where the error exists, and we're grouping by the error because I want to see where there's errors. If there are errors, then I want this pipeline to fail because we cannot process. There's many additional questions you can ask, so you can get more specific. If the field's in there, it's fair game. So maybe there's a specific error you're looking for, or maybe you're looking for a specific latency and things like that. The reality of all this is that you can query and pull these things down. It's existing here, and this is the real customer data. And if I go to this raw data tab, I can see all types of things in here, which I made the error so I know is not found, things like that. I'm mucking up the system in that way. And you can apply all types of context. That's your business, and it depends on how you feel about it. In addition to that, we're also processing data. If I go back, we're also processing build events data as well. And so from here, I'll just go to somewhere around 10 minutes. And what we're gathering here are, and I'll group by their status. And so what I'm gathering here is basically success versus failure, things like that. But you can see here is where we have a failure status here. And so it failed here, but it actually succeeded in other places. So you can identify where in the pipeline this is occurring. And also I can see the latency, as I know I'm doing a simulation. And so there's a huge gap in between the time. But you're able to identify all these things and make those data-driven decisions. And this is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Please ask me all the questions possible. Thank you.